Right.
Okay.
I'm recording now.
You are?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Y'all can introduce yourselves. Get started.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for your patience as we sort through our technical difficulties. So welcome to Guiding Your High School Senior Toward College During COVID-19. And today we're going to talk about the admissions process in detail and give you some specific advice around the college admissions process and also how to support your child going through this process. And during our presentation, we're going to we're going to keep in mind the situation around COVID because COVID has affected college admissions in a great way, and we want to be able to give you some advice and some tips about how to deal with that. I know there's a lot of stress for parents and students at this time. So let us go ahead and introduce ourselves. Tara, do you want to do that first?
Sure. My name is Dr. Tara Egan, and I am a therapist, a parent coach, an author, and a podcast host. And I've been working with kids and their families for almost 20 years. And so when Michelle and I connected, we wanted to find a way to communicate with parents about the logistics of applying to college, but also keep in mind just the stressful aspects and things that parents can do to support their children throughout the process in a way that is productive and efficient and still taking into account your child's personality.
And I am Michelle Mcaday. I am the founder of The College Spy. I am an independent educational consultant, which is sometimes known as a college admissions coach or college admissions counselor. I help students navigate the entire admissions process from building the college list to completing the application in a way that maximizes their chances of acceptance. And I work with all of my students on Zoom, and I always have, even before COVID. So I have students around the country, and I have some international students as well.
Okay. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get started with the actual presentation. And so we want to talk about the logistics and the reality of COVID-19 right now, and that what we're seeing in kids and adults is that there's a significantly higher rate of stress. So by stress, you might see it in as far as symptoms like disrupted sleep, anxiety, moodiness, feeling isolated from friends, really just having a negative reaction to the fact that our world is kind of transient right now, as far as we don't know what's going to be happening in the future. And so kids are showing a lot of stress, as are their parents. So that's just really something to keep in mind, and that it's adding a whole layer of emotionality that we might not typically see. And when we have the stressful circumstances of kids applying to college, and then we have this pandemic and the changes that kids are having in their schedules and in their learning, it can really have an impact. Also, the way the culture of kids' lives are right now is that they're really used to having immediate gratification. If we think about their technology usage, online shopping, being able to connect with friends at a moment's notice, in the college application process, that's not the case. They have to really plan out their schedule. They have to be very mindful. They have to methodically go through the process and do it with attention to detail. And that really contradicts everything else in their life right now. So that's just something to keep in mind as far as the degree of stress. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention that's a dynamic right now in COVID is that kids really feel entitled to have unlimited access to friends. So if they're asked to step away from socialization to do some of the more detail-oriented tasks, it can cause them to have symptoms of stress and resentment. So it's just an aspect of their lives that are really factoring into their decision-making and their ability to be task-oriented.
So what I want to talk about in this part of the presentation, and Tara, if you can move it to the next slide, is the reality of COVID specifically to seniors and juniors as COVID continues around building the college list. This has been a very difficult application season for students because they haven't been able to create lists that they feel confident about. And sometimes when students don't feel confident in their lists, they're less motivated to do the work that they need to do right now in order to apply. So here's why they are struggling with their college lists due to COVID. Students can't visit. The best way to learn if a school is a good fit for you and if you want to apply there is to visit the campus, look around, and say to yourself, am I going to be comfortable here? You will learn a lot more going to campus and taking the tour and doing the information session than you can from a Google search, from books, and from reviews from other students. So that has been a problem for students who have built their lists for this application season. The other thing that has been really difficult due to COVID is the situation with taking SATs and ACTs. So I'm sure many of you know that students who their tests have been canceled since March. So we have some students who tested before March who might have a score that they were planning on retesting and bringing that score up. So they have a score they don't like. And then many students don't have scores at all. And scores are helpful for students in figuring out which colleges are the most competitive for them, which will be the most selective, difficult for them to get into, which are target schools, and which are safe options. Sometimes just using GPA for that can be very difficult, especially this year when GPA is a little, I want to say skewed. Last spring, students had grades all over the place, and some students didn't have grades at all. They had pass-fail. So it's difficult for students to figure out which colleges to put on their list and how competitive their application would be. And the other change that has happened is all the changes in the trends in admissions that we could count on. And I say count on because, in air quotes, because these trends are often things that we believe aren't necessarily true, that it's a trend, but it isn't a trend for your colleges. So the things that we know about the best of our ability before now are different. And those things are test optional college admissions. Many colleges have switched to test optional policies. So students are confused. Does that mean it's easier to get in? Is it going to be harder for them to get in with their particular situation? Another trend is early decision, and typically that makes it easier to be accepted. However, you need to know with early decision whether or not you're going to, whether or not that's the right school for you to apply to, because it's a binding commitment. If you get in, go. And the other thing we don't know is the institutional needs. Colleges make decisions about who to accept based on their own needs, their own finances, their own needs for certain types of students, and that has changed due to COVID. So this is not easy. It's unprecedented. And my heart goes out to students and parents going through it always does, but because it's a stressful process, but even more so during COVID. So we can go on to the next slide. So this is my recommendation for my students. So students who work with the College SPY, and my recommendation for you: expand your college list. This is the year to apply to more colleges than normally would if we didn't have the effects of COVID. And make sure that when you're expanding your list, that they include a range of schools in terms of selectivity. So safe bets, you're definitely going to get in. Targets, you're likely to get in. And reach colleges where you're not sure. You'll be lucky to get in. It's a selective school for you. And the other way that I'm encouraging students to expand their lists is around the criteria that they have developed for their college lists. Because a lot of students don't have strong criteria right now the way that they would if we didn't have COVID. For example, I have some students who aren't sure if they prefer an urban environment or a more rural environment. In that case, I say apply to both so that you have options come spring. If you take a guess on it right now, you might be sorry later on because you guessed wrong when you got more information about those different types of environments. And this holds true for many kinds of criteria that students might have.
Okay.
Is the next slide mine also? If so, I think it's just moving slowly on my screen to getting there. It
Oh,
is.
really? Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
admissions
yeah.
deadlines.
Yeah, that's why I'm pausing. I'm thinking maybe it's Tara's turn to talk, but I've got another one.
Okay.
So this is a document that I have created, and it's on my website, thecollegespy.com, under the resources tab. So you can print it out for yourself and read it. And it's all about the admissions deadlines: early decision, early action, restrictive early action, sometimes called single choice early action, regular decision, and rolling decision. So students get a choice of these types of deadlines, and there's lots of pros and cons to applying under the different deadlines, and you make your decision based on your individual circumstances. But for the purposes of this presentation, I want to talk about early decision only. Early decision is a deadline that colleges have created where they allow you to apply to one school under the early decision deadline. And if you get in, you're making a commitment to go. You're expected to withdraw all your other applications, and this is your school. And this has been typically a great way to get into a reach college. Do your research early, go visit colleges, figure out your number one school, apply early decision. Because colleges can accept sometimes up to 40% of their freshman class through early decision deadlines. They want to accept the least number of students possible to fill their freshman classes. The reason is that keeps them selective in the college rankings in US News and World Report and other publications. So a great way to do that is early decision. They know these students are going to attend if offered a place in the class. What's been difficult about this during COVID is that students are having a very difficult time determining what schools to put on their list at all, like we just talked about, but certainly which of those schools are their number one. And this has caused a lot of stress because kids know and parents know the way to get into a reach college is apply early decision. And now they're in a situation where they're not sure which school to pick for early decision. There's one other downside, and then I think Tara's going to talk a little bit about these deadlines as well. There's one other downside to applying early decision for some families that I want to highlight in this presentation, and that is that you don't get the opportunity to compare financial aid packages. So if you get into their school early decision, you either take their financial aid package they give you or you leave it, because that's the only way to get out of an early decision deadline, ethically, according to the colleges, is because they didn't give you enough money. So once you've withdrawn all your other applications, you don't get to compare. And so if you want to factor price into your decision for which school to go to, early decision is not a good fit for you for that reason. However, not applying early decision for a reach college could mean that you don't get in.
Okay. That's helpful. Okay, so this one, we're going to talk a little bit about organized activities. And so this is you, Michelle.
Okay, so this is how I've been advising students with extracurricular activities throughout COVID and over the summer. It's a lot of stress around activities being canceled, and therefore students are very concerned that they don't have enough activities, or they weren't able to participate in the activities that they really wanted to highlight on their college applications. And what I have encouraged students to do is choose a project that they are interested in and complete that project on their own. And the project can be anything. I have some examples here. They can start a virtual band. They can start a blog, start a business, learn a new hobby or skill such as sewing, cooking, or gardening. I have a student right now who created a medium-sized garden. I was going to say large. It was more medium, and is giving away to her neighbors the fruits and vegetables that are coming from the garden. And that is going on her college application. Students are doing virtual babysitting, online courses, embracing fitness. It can be anything the student is interested in. This is a good idea because it shows initiative, and colleges, especially reach colleges, love students who take the initiative, because they know that students who do that are going to also do that when they get to college, and they're going to make the most of their time at college. And it's really important that the student has genuine interest in the activity that they choose, or the project that they choose, or they're just going to dabble in it and it's not really going to stick. So my recommendation is to choose projects and put those on the application. And just quickly, I wanted to give you some tips about the activity section of the Common application. You have 10 spaces where you can list 10 activities. Students often feel pressured to list 10. It's not necessary. They want quality, they're not interested in quantity. You should list these in the order of their importance to you, not chronological order. I always encourage students to think broadly. Colleges want to know what you're doing beyond organized, typical activities that high school students do. So hobbies should be listed, family obligations should be listed, and you're given 150 characters to explain each activity. So you need to use that space wisely. I suggest not putting it in full sentences, doing it in phrases like resume style to save space. And we'll talk a little bit more about what to do if 150 characters is not enough in the next section, or a little later in the presentation.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tara.
Well, I wanted to talk about some ways that students can like set themselves up for success. So you want to create a plan to succeed. And so when you're thinking about the project or the activity that you want to explore in depth, to be able to present to colleges so that they understand that you have initiative, what your interests are, get a view of what your personality and work ethic is like, I really encourage students to consider, is this a project that they want to do solo, or do they want to do it with a partner? So it could be a peer, it could be a good friend that you feel is reliable and is going to have the same goals that you do. It could be an adult, like a parent or a teacher, or someone through your community organizations like Boy Scouts or your church or synagogue. But it is important to understand what type of support you need. And then from there, to create a timeline. So this is where you have an understanding that this isn't going to be, a weekend project, that this is going to be something that you're going to show dedication to. And in order to do that, it needs to take place over time, and that you're building that project or that activity. And so you want to pace yourself so that you can explore that activity at an appropriate pace and make sure that you're doing it in a way that's meaningful. You want to go ahead and gather your materials and determine whether there's any barriers to success. So make sure you're getting the support you need, that you have the funding to explore your project, whether it's, okay, I'm going to create an online course and I need a way to present it to my audience, whether you're going to grow that garden and you need to make sure you have space allocated and that you have the funds to, plant and take care of that garden. I have a daughter who's a high schooler, and the project that she's been working on is she is the co-host of my podcast. So she and I plan all the episodes. We obviously record them together. We have editing goals. We have marketing goals. And so this is something that's going to take place over a series of months or even years. We're going to do several seasons, and she's going to explore interests in topics that relate to being a teenager. So for her, she's got a lot of initiative. She's got time management. She has all of the individual skills she's learning. And so it's going to be important that she be able to present that on her college application. And because it's something that she likes and she's good at, it increases the likelihood that it's going to be a successful project. We do want to talk a little bit about the impact of social media on your college application. So I'm going to have Michelle start here, but it's really important to acknowledge what the role is of social media in teenagers' lives, and they have the opportunity to use it for good, to enhance their application and how they present themselves to colleges and their community, or it can be something that can contribute to poor choices and actually cause them to be limited in their choices. So Michelle, you go ahead and talk about some of the ways that technology can be used to enhance an application.
Sure, I definitely will. Tara, while you were talking, I was noticing our Q&A, and that we have one question in the Q&A, and I realized that we didn't say we're going to answer questions at the end of our presentation and leave time for that. So if you have any questions about what we're talking about, please put them in the Q&A, and we will get to them. So yes, social media strategies. So I have decided to build as part of my curriculum and working with students to include social media in it, because 35% of colleges admit to looking at students' social media when deciding whether or not to accept them. And I think that, I say admit because I think it's more. And I think they especially are looking if a student is on the bubble and they aren't sure whether or not to accept that student. They're likely to try to get some more information from social media. And a lot of people think that what they're looking for is reasons not to accept you. We all have heard those stories about students who have been accepted to a college and then their acceptance is rescinded because it comes out that there's something racist or something else similarly awful in their social media, and the colleges have decided that they are no longer wanted on campus. That's not what I work on with students. Students seem to know that you're not supposed to post things that you don't want grandma to see, right? We all hear that. What I help students do is show their skills, abilities, interests, characters through a digital profile. And I have them curate content for colleges. Sometimes I get a little bit of pushback from students because they really, really want to use social media for social reasons, for connecting with friends, and they don't want to take other uses of it into consideration. And so what I do is I have them set up separate accounts that they are using specifically for college admissions purposes, and the accounts are separate, and they are what we do is we use the email they're going to apply to college with. It goes with the accounts they're using for college admissions, and then their social accounts are under a separate email. So when colleges are searching for them on social media, they're going to search through by email. And then they find the account that we want them to. And I'm having them curate content for colleges and really have a digital profile up there. A great place to do this is LinkedIn. All of my students have LinkedIn profiles. They're telling their stories there, and they're connecting with colleges there. And they are all set up for when they get to college for that first internship that they're looking for. They're already making those networking connections and using it thoughtfully and helpfully. The other thing that students can do with social media that's really important in the admissions process is demonstrate interest in colleges. And like I told you before, colleges want to accept students who want to attend. So using social media to demonstrate your interest by following colleges and engaging with them on social media can help you get into college, because colleges are keeping track of which IP addresses are following and engaging, and the kids in many schools are getting a score on how interested they are. There are other ways to demonstrate interest besides social media, so I just thought I'd mention quickly here. I have a checklist that I've been giving out. If you haven't gotten it yet, just email me, Michelle@thecollegespy.com, and I'd be happy to send it to you for free. And Michelle is 2 L's and an E at the end. So Tara's going to talk also about social media strategies, because she's weaved social media into her work and has a specialization with it. So I'll let her tell you about that.
Right. And some of this is common sense things that I know parents have informed their kids about over and over, but just have them recognize that content lasts forever. So even though Michelle was talking about linking a specific email address to the college application, because that's what they're going to do to search, we also know that if kids make mistakes online, it can get back to places that they would rather not. So making sure that they understand that all the content out there is really public, and they should be mindful about posting and not post things impulsively. And they should also recognize that regardless of, you know, what their personal belief is on some sort of circumstance in the world right now, is that in the college environment, there is a culture of acceptance and diversity. And so it's really important that kids understand that when they're going to college and they have that goal, that the school is going to be looking for students who also promote acceptance and diversity. So there is consequences if they say something online that contradicts that. So it's just really important for them to recognize, like, know your audience, read the room. And you wouldn't want some impulsive statement said about current events to reflect poorly, and it might not represent their values or their perspective later on. So they just need to be mindful of that. Recognizing that today's professor is tomorrow's boss. One of the things that we encourage kids to do throughout high school and college is to make those connections. So it might be connecting with somebody who's in a field that a student is interested in on LinkedIn, or following an Instagram page of a professional. And so, sometimes kids forget that their world gets bigger, that the exposure that they have to people who could have a positive influence on their career or their life later on, they have the opportunity to connect with. So they just need to understand that that is a manner of thinking that shows that maturity. And then also, kids make mistakes online. They do. Everybody does. And if there's an occasion where they make a mistake, they need to own that mistake and make amends, whether it's an apology, whether it's, championing a cause that is important to the world, whatever it is. But that is a sign of maturity. And, and I've talked to Michelle personally, and she's talked about how colleges, they recognize that kids are young, that they can have kind of immature viewpoints or behavior, and it's not necessarily anything that's unforgivable, but we do want kids to always be mindful of how they're presenting themselves online. Let's switch over and talk a little bit about the college essay. Go ahead, Michelle.
Sure. I wanted to give some tips about the college essay. College essay is so important during this application season. It always is, but what colleges are saying now is that because they're anticipating not having a lot of SAT and ACT scores because students didn't have the ability to test and the colleges have gone test optional, they're going to be looking at the other parts of the application and weighting them more heavily. I was in a meeting yesterday with a admissions counselor from the University of Scranton, and those words come right out of his mouth, that is what they need to do. They're not expecting a lot of scores. The essay is also important because it's one of the things that's still in the student's control. They're much set. They may get a chance to test for SAT, ACT, but not many. These are activities they've done throughout high school are set. This essay is a place to shine. They still have the ability to create something and tell their story to admissions, and this could help them get in. So I want to give you some tips around it. So the first thing I want to tell you is that the essay is supposed to be written in the student's voice. It is very important that it sounds like a 17-year-old wrote it. And sometimes this is difficult for English teachers, parents who might be doing editing, family, friends, because they think that the type of essay that admissions is looking for has a little bit more sophisticated language than what's in the student's voice, and they start to make changes or change it for them. This is a mistake. It won't help you get into college. It could hurt. It should sound like a 17-year-old wrote it. The other thing that students sometimes struggle with is changing the style of their essay from what they've learned in English class, which is to write that 5-paragraph English essay where you have an intro, 3 body paragraphs that support the introduction, and a conclusion that basically repeats the introduction. That's not a college essay. A college essay is a story that demonstrates personal qualities and characteristics that the student chooses on purpose to talk about and to highlight in the admissions in their application. I want to caution parents and other adults about over editing and say again that sophisticated language is not necessary, that the admissions officers are looking for the story and the message behind the story much more than they are looking at the writing style. Many admissions counselors have told me that the writing style is just not important. They're trying to get the content. And the other thing is that the story that the student tells does not have to be about something big. It can be something very small, such as a moment in time. And I want to give you an example. One of my students this year wrote about, for her essay, a bagel breakfast. She wrote about freshman year. She went to a breakfast hosted by her new school, which is a magnet school. Not the students going there didn't know one another. And she talked about the experience of sitting at the table at the bagel breakfast and nobody was talking to each other, and what she did about it. And she was able to highlight her leadership skills and what she did in order to make the breakfast more comfortable for everybody, draw the other students in, and they all ended up having a good time and starting to make new friends. So she wanted to highlight her leadership skills, and what she did was she picked this one moment in time and told a story about it to highlight that. She's a natural leader. So it's just an example for you.
That's a good example. I think you're right as far as, having kids write about things that are really relatable and letting them have their voice and their personality shine through. And it can be tempting as a parent to hover, to, overmanage the situation. And I do want to give some tips to parents about some ways that they can be supportive of their child in the process of writing the essay, but not overdo it and end up influencing your child's writing sample to the point where it doesn't sound authentic to a 17-year-old. So the first thing is for parents to check in with their own anxiety, recognize where you are emotionally in this process. Some parents are extremely anxious about it. They are worried their child will be disappointed. They have goals for their children that, most often align, but sometimes don't. And it's really important for parents to remember that your child's academic ability and personality strengths have led them to this point where they've done well academically. They've created a list of colleges that suit them, and they're now at the stage where they get to write an essay that reflects something about themselves personally. And so having some faith that your child is going to be able to continue this momentum. And then, of course, we are relying on kids to use these writing abilities as well as organizational strategies to succeed in college. So this is a great opportunity for them to take that initiative and use the skills that they're going to need to rely on so heavily later on. I also encourage parents to collaborate with your child. So this might mean sitting down with them and saying, hey, what's the plan for the essay? What are you thinking? And so really encouraging your child to take notes about their thoughts, maybe what their timeline is, what kind of support that they might need. And so it's not you writing for them, but it's just helping them organize the process, or maybe just get some thoughts churning about what they might write about, because sometimes kids have a hard time really being self-reflective. But if you're sitting down with your child and it's at the computer and you're typing, or pushing them aside a little bit so you can get to the keyboard, then you've probably overstepped. Well, not probably, you've definitely overstepped. And so you don't want to get to that point. And then also, one of the things as parents that can be difficult is worrying that your child's going to make careless mistakes, where there's going to be a typo, where there's going to be some sort of editing issue that just doesn't reflect what their true skills are. So it's okay to encourage them to find someone to proofread their essay for those mistakes, whether it be a peer who's a strong writer or a teacher at school, but somebody just to take a glance and make sure that there isn't anything that really doesn't represent what their academic skills are. So it all comes down to managing your own anxiety and sort of planning the process in a collaborative way with your student so that you can both feel good about the process and the student can feel proud about the content that they produce.
There's a section of the application, the common application, that is optional. It's called the additional information section, where students are given the same amount of space that they're given in their personal essay, their college essay, 650 words, to write about anything that they want. And oftentimes, I would say most students don't know what to write here and skip this part. So I want to give you some ideas of what would be appropriate to put in this section. Most of my students are using it because the more information that admissions has about you, the better. So sometimes what happens is that students, when they're trying to just come up with an essay topic, they have two topics and they have a hard time picking one. They don't know which one tells their story better, or they feel that their application is not complete without talking about both topics. So the additional information section is the place to put the second topic that didn't make it into the personal statement or the personal essay. It's not necessary, and you really shouldn't write another personal essay because, like I told you, the personal statement is or the college essay is really a story. So the additional information section is not a story, but you can still get across the same points in a non-story style of writing. This is also the place if your student is on the autism spectrum, has a learning disability or ADHD, that they might choose to disclose this information about their disability and talk about some of the challenges that they've experienced, how they've overcome them, what they're still working on, and how they hope to get assistance in college, what they plan to do in order to be successful college students. So this is the place for information about that. The other thing you can put on the additional information section is discrepancies in your transcript. Sometimes students have a semester or a year of low grades that just show up as, all A's across the board and then a semester of C's. And admissions has no way to understand why that happened. And this is the place to talk about it. Maybe you had a concussion or something was happening at home. It could be any reason, number of reasons why there might be a low grade or a low semester, all your grades in a semester. So you can write about those discrepancies here. Careful though about not writing a series of excuses. It needs to be done strategically. Mm-hmm. The other thing you can put in the additional information section is links. So like I told you, a lot of colleges are looking at social media. So I say, let's make it easy for them. Put a link to your LinkedIn and invite admissions to come and look at it, or your blog, or your personal website, or if kids who are podcasting, or your podcast. So I said that this section is 650 words. It's not necessary to fill up all 650 words. You can write a paragraph, you can write 3 sentences, you could put a link and with a little explanation, please take a look at this. So it can be very short.
Okay. One of the things I just want to highlight about this section, and this isn't just specific to the additional information, but it's also about the essay portion, is just recognizing that character matters. Demonstrating how, if you have had a challenge in your world, how it's contributed to your personal growth. Be able to highlight persistence, self-advocacy, empathy, well-developed work ethic. Things that show your initiative and leadership. So you might need, or it might be in your best interest to share about a family circumstance or health challenge you've had, or a reason why your semester took a dip in grades, but to really present it as it was an opportunity of growth. And making sure that if you say, okay, well, I have a diagnosis of ADHD, however, I've learned to be a great self-advocate. And if you can share a small detail to demonstrate how that's played out in your essay, or, because that's more of the story format, or some sort of, conveying it in one of the products that you reveal in additional information. Like if you have a podcast and you have an episode about overcoming symptoms of ADHD, that might be a great thing to highlight. And then making sure that your readers understand and feel like an emotional connection to you, where they feel invested in you as a person and recognize your strengths. So you want to share enough personal details to show your growth, but not overshare where it's just kind of getting into a zone that's just too personal or uncomfortable for your reader. All right, so one of the things we want to do before we conclude today, we're trying to be mindful of your time, is just talk about other ways that Michelle and I can support you throughout this process. Now, she mentioned earlier that one of my specialty areas is in supporting kids and families with managing technology and social media. So if you have kids who are really struggling to present themselves in a successful way on social media, or their technology and social media is impacting their ability to prepare for college. Maybe it's distracting them from their academics. Maybe you feel like they have more moodiness or irritability, or they're gravitating away from interests that they've had in the past. They might benefit from a little bit of support and coaching in this area. And then I also just want to mention again, the podcast that my daughter and I do together, the topics that we cover, they're not always related to teens or even going to college, but they are very relatable to parenting and families. So it's called One Day You'll Thank Me. You can find it on all the common podcasting platforms, whether it's Apple or Spotify or iHeartRadio, Pandora, all of those places that you could find it. And every episode is a little bit different, and we have some great interviews with experts that can be helpful for parents, but it may be an episode that could be really helpful for your child, your middle schooler or your teen, and it could be something that you could share together.
I just wanted to mention that we are at the College Spy are still taking clients and seniors. Most of the time we start working with students junior year. However, I have created a senior rush package for people who would like to start working together now to complete their applications and shore up their lists. And I also, the College Spy has a college essay specialist, Erin Hubman, helping students with the college essays. And the package is being discounted for people who have seen our webinars from $2,500 to $1,900, and it includes the Common App essay and 2 supplemental essays. And all of my packages and the prices can be found on the website under the packages section. If you click on each one, the price comes up along with a description of the packages. So I'd be happy to chat with anybody who might be interested in working together.
Okay. And we have this last slide here that shows our contact information, where you can tap into resources, where you can connect with us on social media or learn more about the products and services that we offer. I have 2 websites. I have charlotteparentcoaching.com, and that's my therapy practice that is located in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so when I provide therapy for students who are struggling with decision-making or time management, or maybe they're experiencing social issues or anxiety, my therapy practice supports those students, but I am licensed only in North Carolina. My other website, drterryegan.com, if you go there, you find some of the coaching opportunities to work with me individually, as well as the podcast. You can find the titles of my books and just general information. So I really do encourage you to visit both of those websites and let me know if you have any questions or you would like to share some comments about this presentation.
And you can find me all over social media. I am on Facebook, and I have a business Facebook page at the College Spy, but I also host a very much growing group called the College Admissions Parent Information Group. So if you'd like to join that group, I'm there. Our essay specialist, Erin, is there, and we have some people who I trust around standardized testing who I've invited to join the group. So it's a lot of people sharing information and giving out excellent tips. Also, this is a great place for me to plug my Twitter. If you are on Twitter, I really encourage you to follow at the College Spy, because Twitter allows you to post 8 times a day appropriately, where Facebook does not. That feels like spam to people if you post that much. So I have about 8 posts going out every day that are college admissions tips. So I highly recommend that you follow me on Twitter. I also have a podcast that can be found everywhere called the College Spy Podcast, and you can see my website there and my email.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
Well, let's,
that's great. Thank you, Dr. Egan and Michelle. We have a couple questions. I don't know if y'all want to take a look at them before we finish them. I don't know if this is the time for that.
so right here we can you
yes.
see these? Okay.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna,
I can read some questions and y'all can answer
okay,
them between y'all if y'all want.
sure.
All
Sure,
right.
go ahead.
We have the first question from Sarah. I think this was first when we were talking about the SATs. She says, just learned that my son's SATs test in Eastern Pennsylvania is canceled once again. He's a senior and has no test score at this point, and we are now getting down to the wire for application deadlines. So stressed, she says. Any word that College Board will open up opportunities for digital testing?
No, I don't think they're going to open up for digital testing because they got a lot of backlash when they did the AP online. And I believe there's even a lawsuit coming out about that. So I doubt that they're going to put themselves in that situation. I think more and more colleges, as kids can't test, are going to choose test optional admissions policies. And they're going to look more at the letters of recommendation and the essay for information. And I know this is really stressful, especially for some students, it's a relief, but there are students out there who test really well, and it's one of the ways that they show their strength. And my suggestion is to put in the additional information, just that I'm an excellent test taker. Maybe here are my PSAT scores if they're good and you want to share that information, and I know that I would have gotten whatever, and this is how I'm doing on practice tests. So I think that's the best you're going to be able to do. And this is one of those things that's not within your control. So letting go of the stress the best you can is my recommendation.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I hope that answers Sarah. And Chris, next question says, when is the best time for student to start working with an educational consultant like yourself?
Oh, it depends on the student. So I would say I am most comfortable when I start with students junior year, sometime during the first semester, and I am growing that class of students right now because that gives us enough time to do everything that I've included in my curriculum so that when they get to the end of their summer, they're ready to go. They're done with most of their application. They're kind of chomping at the bit, waiting for the guidance counselors to get back to school and send off the transcripts and the rest of the pieces that need to go from the school to the colleges. I do have some students who will start working with me earlier at sophomore year. And when I do have the opportunity to work with them, I find it to be helpful for most students because I can intervene, not in a bad way, in a good way, and make suggestions about courses that they should take to meet their admissions goals, activities they might want to do, get them started on college visits when it's not COVID. So especially for students who have very specific goals, maybe they're interested in medical school, maybe they know that there's a certain college they want to reach. I could be very valuable there. The other thing that I do when I work with younger students often is I find myself working with students who maybe they're the kind of students that wouldn't get a lot of attention at school. I used to be a school counselor, so I can accurately speak to that job. I had a lot of students, so there were some that just didn't get the same amount of attention as others because there's limited time and a lot of duties. And so what I find is that when I work with a student who normally wouldn't get attention from educational resources and professionals at school, that I can really help them kind of scratch the surface of something, and they're like, oh, you're doing really well, but you are a slow reader. Let's explore that some more. Or it could be anything, often about anxiety and getting help around anxiety earlier. So I love to work with students younger, but most people do start junior year.
Well, and I do encourage you on that vein, Michelle, if you're a parent out there whose child is really struggling with things that they really need to be successful in school, whether it is managing anxiety or coming up with strategies to deal with time management issues or prioritizing tasks, advocating for themselves. Like that is a place where I support students extensively because we want them to be gaining independence. And so it's not just about getting them into college, but it's about them being able to show success when they get there and feel a sense of competence in their ability. So sometimes I work directly just with the students, and other times it's really more of like a family approach about what skills, emotional skills, behaviors that they can exhibit that can really enhance their ability to reach their goals. And if you start that a little earlier, and then by the time they work with an educational consultant like Michelle, they can be pretty task oriented because they feel confident and like they have the skills. So it can be a really important component to start it early enough so that they have the time to absorb all those things.
Great. Actually, Hallie asks a question that could go with both of y'all. Relocating from Charlotte and wondering if you work with students virtually from different states. So do y'all?
Oh, so you're okay. I see her question here. Mm-hmm. So when I work with students, and I'm not sure if she's directing this question to Michelle. I know Michelle works with students all over, and she is not limited to a certain state. For me, to do therapy and do really therapeutic work, than it is through North Carolina. You do have to reside in North Carolina. When it comes to coaching and working with kids on a very specific skill set, and it's not therapy, it's really more of a skill development. And oftentimes I tackle those issues with balance with social media and technology and that kind of the mood, the irritability and the conflict that we see between kids and parents, then that can be accomplished through my one-to-one coaching packages that you can find on drterryegan.com.
Awesome. Thank you. And next question. The difference, Augustina says, many of my daughter's colleges take both the Common and the Coalition application. Is one preferable over the other?
The colleges said the colleges do not care. The questions are very similar. I would say do what's convenient. So whichever one has, encompasses the most colleges, that's the one you should do.
Awesome. And somebody anonymous writes, it sounds like a student's Girl Scout Gold Award or Boy Scout Eagle Award project will serve as a purpose for a project. Would you recommend that in the project section?
That would go in that additional information, wouldn't it?
It could go in the additional information if they want to describe the project in detail. Sure. That does definitely count as a project. Absolutely. I'm hesitating a slight bit. That's not hesitation. They should do it. It's wonderful to receive your Gold Award. In that the types of projects I were talking about were things that were not connected to other organized activities. So really the self-initiated projects. So even though the Gold Award project is self-initiated, it's connected to Girl Scouts and that particular project. So, but students have limited time. So as long as they're engaged in something meaningful, it's going to, those activities will help them get accepted to college.
Can I share a tiny little anecdote? So my ex-husband went to Johns Hopkins Medical School, which is the #1 medical school in the country. And he was very bright, but he did go to a state school in New York. I mean, he wasn't coming from the Ivies or anything. And he, during his interview for medical school, that #1 medical school, connected with the interviewer on how they're both Eagles. And so he really attributes the fact that he was part of such a reputable organization and really saw that project through, as it wasn't necessarily an application thing, but it was a place of strength and connection with somebody when he was connecting with them professionally in the form of the interview. So I remember him very specifically feeling like that was a turning point in the interview that set him apart. But that was a million years ago. I mean, he applied to medical school in like 1998, so keep that.
I'm sure that helps though. It definitely doesn't, it definitely is not bad. Beta asks, the AP tests were done with so many glitches. Is it worth trying to challenge my score with College Board? Sounds like maybe a student here.
I'm not sure if it's worth doing that. I mean, it depends on the score, depends on the student. If you're hoping a higher AP score will help you get accepted to college, I'd say don't bother. Put your focus on something else. If you're worried that your score is not high enough to get the credits, maybe, but I don't think that the colleges are really looking at scores. In general, I don't think they really care much about the AP scores, but especially this year with the APs being so different and short, I don't think that they're going to make a difference in admissions.
Awesome. And I think we have two more questions if we have time. Does BSMD college name matter for medical school? From Mata.
I'm going to read that question on my own. Oh, I am not an expert in medical school. I don't do admissions to graduate programs, and I don't feel comfortable commenting on that because it's a yes or a no, and I'm sure, like with many things with college admissions, the answer is it depends. So I'm gonna pass that on to somebody else that you can find that might be able to give a better answer.
Yeah, because I think from my experience of having friends go to medical school, they really look at the entire profile. They look at, are you coming from a competitive program with a competitive major, as well as, have you done research or gotten any experience in the community in the medical field? So I think there's a lot of different aspects that go to that beyond just what the undergraduate program is. But yeah, I'm sure that there's consultants who really work with that, whether it's law school or medical school specifically, because it is so niched.
Yeah, one thing I can advise you to do is when you're doing research about which colleges to apply to is look into the pre-med advising that the college offers, the undergraduate college offers, and how strong it is, because some schools have much stronger advising for students than other schools. So that's a question you're going to want to ask at this stage.
And also, if it's an undergraduate program that has a medical school attached to it, like Cornell, for example, there's Cornell Medical School and there's Cornell undergraduate. I mean, you can be pretty certain that a medical school is going to look highly upon their own undergraduate program. So that's another thing just to think about.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see.
Well,
do we have any other ones?
I think the last question that we have time for is, I think this is very good. Do you help students figure out what type of school will be best fit for them if they might need some guidance? I guess this is directed for Michelle.
Does it say what kind of guidance?
To choose what type of school will best fit them. Like
no, it doesn't specifically say what type of guidance they need.
Okay. I mean, that is the complete focus of what I do, is help students find best fit colleges. There's over 3,000 colleges in the United States, and they're really different from one another. So what I do is when it's not COVID, I visit about 40 colleges a year, because I feel that if I'm telling kids you should stand on campus to feel the culture of the school, I want to make sure I did the same thing so I can accurately match up the students and with the right colleges for them to look into. So what I do is I get to know the students really well, and then I know the colleges really well, and I kind of do this and help them build a list. It's a process and it takes time. But in terms of just guidance in general, I don't know if you're referring to like academic guidance. If so, I just want to say I do work with students with learning disabilities. So, and I visit colleges specifically that have programs for students with learning disabilities. So that's something I do know about. So if that's what you meant, the answer is yes.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Then thank you, Dr. Egan. I think that's pretty much it for the QA.
Okay. Well,
Great.
I just want to say
Thank
thank you to everyone for attending. It was really great to see the participation. You had some great questions. And I definitely encourage you to reach out to both Michelle and I, whether it's via social media or directly through our email addresses, if there's any further questions or any other support we can offer your student or your families.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody. I'm glad that you're here. And I took a look at the participant list, and it was nice to see familiar names that I know from other places. So that was really, it's fun. It's fun.
All right.
Take care. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.